Hi, welcome to Myles From Home, a not so late night talk show. I'm your host, David Myles, coming to you from my new home. That's right, I moved back home to Fredericton, New Brunswick. That's where we're doing this from, Fredericton tonight. And I am absolutely thrilled to be with everybody. I got a great show. Our guest is Sheree Fitch. Please say hi. I'll be seeing the comments, so let me know that you can hear me, that you can see me, that you dig the lights, the camera. I got my suit on. I don't wear a suit much these days. I'll admit it, but it is nice to put it on for these special occasions. And I'll tell you, my friends, this is a very special occasion because Sheree Fitch, for much of my life, has been like a second mother to me. When I was a kid growing up on Charlotte Street, just down the block lived Sheree Fitch and her two sons, Jordan and Dustin. And Dustin and I were inseparable, absolutely inseparable through elementary school. We played basketball. We watched every basketball game. We did everything together at Connaught Street School and had an absolute blast. And we were always at Sheree's house. She was the matriarch. She was taking care of us. She was entertaining us. She was telling us stories, reading us poems as she was writing them. It was such a cool experience for me. And so this is special. This is just inherently special because I've grown up with Sheree Fitch. And now I've got to know her as a professional artist, a professional poet, writer, educator. And it is even more remarkable because there's all these similarities. And the similarities, I think, are the things that make her most special. The similarities, I mean, between what I knew her as a kid and how I know her now as an adult. And that is that Sheree Fitch gives herself entirely to the world. She just gives. She opens her heart completely to everybody. All conversations. She did this when we were kids. Being around Sheree, you felt love. Her heart was open to you. She felt your pain and she took it in. And her heart was wide open. And she's still like that. She's like that as a writer and she's like that as a friend. And I think it's particularly special because so many people as they get older, we tend to close ourselves off. We tend to become a little bit less vulnerable because we're scared. We're scared of being hurt. And we get hurt as we get older. Things happen and we tend to close ourselves off. And Sheree has done almost the opposite. She's faced great tragedy in her life and has faced it with this same openness, this willingness to share her experience and her grief and open herself to sharing other people's grief with her. And it's so special because in doing so, she makes us all feel less alone. We all grieve. We all grieve at certain points. And when a poet, when a writer like Sheree opens herself up like that, we feel less alone. I think all the time of this saying that I learned as a kid, that a joy that is shared is doubled and a sorrow that is shared is cut in half. And that's what it's like being around Sheree Fitch, reading her poetry, reading her books. The joys are shared and the grief and the sorrows are shared. It's all very open. And that is a tremendous, tremendous gift to the world. It's an amazing, and it's a huge contribution, artistic and humanitarian. So it is with great pleasure that we're going to get to talk tonight with Sheree Fitch, and I hope that you can all hear me, and it's all looking good. If you have any questions for Sheree, or if you just want to say hi, let me know where you're from. Do it. I'll see it right there. Thank you very much. I see someone commenting on the drum in the back. That is, in fact, a drum made by Alan Syllaboy, one of the finest artists in Canada. I'm so lucky to have a drum by Alan. And hopefully we'll have Alan on the show sometime. He's certainly on the list. I'd love to have him on the show. If you got a question for Sheree, I'll try to keep my eye open here. But honestly, sometimes when I get into the conversations, I lose track and get right into it. So let's try to call Sheree Fitch right now on Skype. We're going to do this because I'm just more and more high tech every single week. No more Luddite for me, my friends. No more Luddite for me. That was a thing of the past. That was pre-COVID. I'm a new man. Let's see. Before I talk too much, let's see if I can pull this off. Here we go. All right, we'll see. I don't know. No answer yet. We did a little test call and it was looking pretty good. I think it's going to happen. Let's just see. I'm going to have to try to call her again. She's not answering, but this is how it works sometimes. I'm not worried. I'm a little worried, but not entirely. Let me just try it again, okay? Okay, let me try this.
Hey,
There
are
you
you?
go. See, I knew it was going to work. I don't see you yet. I don't see you yet.
Okay, sorry. Up here. Can
There.
you see me now?
Oh, and look at you. See, I kind of find that just the technology. I tried calling you a couple seconds ago and it didn't work, but it just adds some tension to the night.
Well, and I don't know what you said before because I was up here waiting and one of the lights burnt out. So, but you can hear me now.
It sounds great, and I can see you perfectly. It's great. See, I just like to add a little tension. I like people to think, oh, maybe this isn't going to happen at all, and then boom, there you are. You just appear.
David, I think every time I do one of these Zoom meetings and I'm starting to get used to it, but every time there is that and at the same time it's like, "Oh, well, everybody understands."
You know what?
These
I've
days
been thinking about that a lot because when I started doing this show, I was so worried about that part. And I think that actually people have become much more patient with these little inconveniences in their lives.
I think so too, and I know it's really good to see your face though.
It's great to see yours too.
And
It's great. Yeah,
and
I am. All that aside, I'm glad it worked.
I am too. And just I just want to say a shout out because my mom got FaceTimed me the other day, and that's new for us. And I'm so happy. I can see her face now when I talk to her.
It's nice,
So
isn't it?
yeah, that's happened too. I think a lot of people we know what we have to do to stay connected.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, all of these things that I've tried to figure out, I was just joking. Like I was a Luddite until COVID, and now I'm trying to get all techie and serious,
Are you serious, David? Because you were so great tonight when you called me before and said okay. I was like, oh, you really know this tech
Oh,
stuff.
it's just, I've been watching YouTube videos. I had to learn it all. I didn't know any
Yeah,
of it at all. So I'm glad I sounded like that.
yeah,
But I'll
yeah.
tell you what I said in the intro. I shouldn't really, maybe you'll be able to go back
I'll
and
look
watch
at
it.
it
But
after.
honestly, what I said was what I found most remarkable about you, and I have since I was a kid, and also as an artist, is that you give yourself entirely to the world.
Mhm.
Every
Yeah,
conversation, your heart is totally exposed, and it's like a dangerous way to live.
it is. And David, over the years, I remember somebody saying to me, "Oh, Sherry, your trouble is you wear your heart on your sleeve." And then somebody saying, "Oh, you're all heart." And I was like, "I have a good head too. Like I use my head too. I've got an IQ as well as an EQ, like but I don't know any other way, David. It's like I am who I am and I give what I can, but I- it's there's a vulnerability that is too much out there. And then there's because like I heard you and Matt talking about this, and on Matt's show, it's like most artists are introverts, but in order to share our art, we learn how to be extroverted in order to offer it out. And so for me, really, David, I do give. It's not an act, even when people say, "Oh, she performs her poetry." Yeah, but I'm really being me, Sherry, doing what I did in the living room with my kids. So it means that you don't wear a lot of masks, and but I do wear some, David, and I'm very intentional about what I put on Facebook, for example, and I I've learned over the time how to protect myself when I have to. You start to know, yeah.
But you're
But I,
but in your writing, I mean, and as a person, as you said with your kids, that's what I experienced as a kid, right? If we felt pain, you felt pain
yeah,
with
yeah,
us.
and yeah, and that's, I remember Fred Cogswell, who was one of my mentors. I remember one day I was upset about something. He used to bring me chat books, Fiddlehead chat books, and then at the time I smoked, not that I don't, it happened for a long time, but he knew I couldn't afford, so he'd bring me a package of cigarettes, and his wife would bake chocolate chip cookies for the kids. And I remember this one, and so we talked poetry. He's the one who encouraged me to go to university, and I was upset about something one day, and I was very upset. And I said, "I know, Fred, I'm too sensitive. I know. I've heard that my whole life. I'm too thin-skinned. I'm too sensitive." And he said, "Compared to who?" And I went, "What?" And he said, "Compared to who, Sherry? You are who you are, and that will be a very great gift to you in your art, and it's also a very hard way to live." And I think he knew of what he talked. And I think we all, I think the difference is at this age, I'm, 64 in December, and over the years, I've had good therapy, good counselors, it's okay to feel the pain of the world if you're an empathetic, hypersensitive, or just sensitive person, but you don't have to carry it. And I think there is a big difference. And I mean, that's what those of us who are empaths, most of us have to learn the difference between, you can feel it, but you can't carry it, because there's enough to carry of your own, right? So, yeah, but I do things, David, like I don't watch the news all the time. I can get upset by the news. I do feel very deeply other people's pain. Yes, I do.
And
Yeah.
what do you do to restore? What are your restorative
Well, over
practices?
the years, I've done it all. I've done meditation. I do meditate. I've been meditating for over 20 years, two different kinds of meditation. I started out with the Buddhist meditation. And then when Jill and I lived in Washington for a decade, the Washington National Cathedral was right there. And there was a Center for Prayer and Pilgrimage that did something called centering prayer, which is basically sit down, be quiet, and listen. And it's very much in the lines of all different cultures who have meditative practices. And I really have found that it was something it was like it saved my life in a way, because that busy mind, especially if you're worried about somebody or if there's somebody you love in pain and you can't help, what do you do? Well, you have to do something. You have to go deeper. And I think that's what you do. You go deeper. And so that because if you're not okay, then you can't help somebody you love when it's time to help, right? So that's it's something that tests you. I mean, are you going to just deny? You can't deny. You have to accept your realities, and no matter how painful they are. And at the same time, you have to be able to balance all that with going out into the world, and are you going to create? Does that take away? And how, I remember Jill being so good over the, like, things happening in our life and it being distressing. And then I had to go out and go, there were monkeys in my kitchen. They were climbing up
Yeah.
the wall. And I felt so hypercritical. It's like, here I am, dealing with something. And here I have to go out in the world and go, I'm happy. But what I found, David, is in doing that, and sometimes, Jill had to push me at certain points in my life. And instead of feeling hypercritical, I thought, isn't it amazing that offering something, and it's not so much about you, it's offering something to somebody else and seeing the smiles on somebody else's face will then in turn be healing to me. And it's kind of a miracle. I really believe that reciprocal relationship between the person who creates, the person who offers, and then what you get back. I mean, poetry is an oral tradition. It's very much like singing. You're offering, you're giving to a a crowd, and usually for me it was a crowd of adults and children, and I would see as many faces, smiles on the faces of adults as I would on the children, and it's almost like I gave them permission to be kids again. So, yeah, I think it's what people say, it's a curse and a blessing.
Hmm.
Our strengths and our weaknesses are often our curse and our blessing, and if we want to be I don't want to. I say stable. I'll never be stable. Like my moods will never. I'm excitable. I'm enthusiastic. I'm sad when I'm sad. But I think
Stable's overrated. Stable's
stable's way overrated. I say like no, forget that. But some kind of equilibrium that feels good, so that you can be your best self, as they say in all those self help books. But it's like you want to be useful in the world, and in order to do that, for me, it means creating.
right.
So yeah,
And being yourself.
and being
And not
yourself.
as Fred, it's interesting because in one, I actually had written that down, is that idea of these early mentors, because
Do you?
I remember him coming to the house. And I
Oh,
never
wow,
really knew who
David,
he
that's
was. I didn't know
amazing.
anything about your job. You know what I mean? I mean, it was all mystery. I was 7, you
I
know?
I know, and the thing is when I look back now, because I'm tracing a writer from the past right now. I won't talk too much. I won't talk about that because I'm superstitious about talking about a work in progress. But um, in doing that, I'm looking at her life and I'm going, oh wow, and she knew this person and she knew this person and she did this and that and she traveled here and I'm like, and as I'm doing it, I'm going, and I knew Fred, and I like met this person, and and these people came to our house, and Jordan has said that to me too. Like some of the people we had at our house, Mom. Like I was like, yeah, but my best friends, David, aren't all writers. I mean,
Hmm.
I always like I think it's really important to have older friends and younger friends and people who do all things, all kinds of things. So, but yeah, I look back and I go, that that house, that little yellow house on Charlotte Street was really filled with life and energy and creativity.
It certainly was.
I see you there, you know.
Oh, it was a wild. It was a wild place. There were monkeys in your kitchen. Literally, we were running around all. Look, I got my books. I brought my books. Look, this
Oh,
is
you got the original
the
Sleeping
original. Look at
Dragon.
this though. This is where it gets pretty funny. I
What?
signed. I must have signed it myself.
I didn't even sign it for you.
Oh, you did. You did. Look,
What did I? Did I? Did I? What did I
my
put?
friend and Dustin's, December
Oh,
'89.
oh, wow. Oh, that's the year it came out. My friend in Dustin's. And yes, you, you were my friend. David, you were the sweetest little boy ever. I loved having you around. And you grew up to be the man you are. And it's not that I don't see you as a man. I do. You're grown up, you have kids, you've got gray in your beard for the love of God. But you were my other monkey son. And, the I do. I see you and Dustin running around and doing your thing and being happy and oh my God, such good memories.
It's
Such good
true, but I
memories.
think about that time now, and I think, okay, you had 2 kids.
Uh-huh.
You were a young woman, a
Yeah,
poet in
I know.
Fredericton.
I know.
And it all seemed we were all having a great time. You know what I mean? We weren't thinking, but that could not have been an easy time.
No, and the thing is like, yeah, I'm sure as a kid that you weren't looking in my fridge going, oh, there's not, she's getting a little low there. But I mean, I had a wonderful family support. I had friends who accepted my weird direction that I was going in. I remember taking a test at Manpower, it was called, if you can imagine at the time, and thinking, what can I do? This was when I was first out of my marriage and with the boys, and what was before I went to university at St. Thomas, which was like going home. But I remember doing one of those aptitude tests, David,
I did the
and
same test at
I did.
Manpower. I did.
So okay, and then you take the test and then you go back. And I remember the counselor that brought me into her desk and sat me down to go over the results of the aptitude class, the test. She looked and then she looked up at me and then she looked and then she looked up and she went, well, I just don't know quite what to say. And I said, what? And she said, yeah, yeah, I've never had these results before. And I said, what? And she said, well, your number one thing is a clown. Your second thing is a furniture upholsterer. And your third thing is something literary.
Right. You're like, well, I might as well be a poet.
I think I combined all of them together. But there were people like, well, Suzanne Alexander worked at the Department of Culture there. I went in with handwritten poems. Somebody said you could go and they have, grants for artists and things. And I went in and gave her like, I think handwritten poems and go, I write, I'm really interested in children's literature but I need money. I'm starting out and, you know, 2 weeks later, there was $400 in my mailbox. And I'm pretty sure, that was an incredible validation. We believe in you. These people in my life, David, I've always said I call them permissionaries because people come along that give you permission to believe in yourself more than you believe.
Uh-huh.
They believe more in you than you believe in yourself at the time. And by them doing that, they validate you. They get like maybe like they see like Fred did, Nancy Bauer did. I could go on Mary Lou Sterling, my mother who took my poems, typed them up, and gave them to Mary Lou, Russ Hunt in my children's literature class. I mean, there is nothing I have done alone. I'd like to say, yes, I was this, everything depended on the kindness, the generosity. Molly Lambeau back did illustrated my first book,
Right.
and things coming together in that way. And I mean, I did have to there was a lot of nights that that pillow beside me was empty on the bed, of course, and my kids were sleeping, and I'd wake up at night and go, what am I going to do when I'm old? I don't have a pension. I those things, like I'm not a real grown up. I don't have a real job. Of course, all those things
Right.
went through my mind. I mean, it was said to me too, then why don't you get a real job then if it's so tough, right? And that's just, it is a real job being an artist. It's also really necessary that you live in the real world and have to put food on the table when you're a father and a mother and contribute to that household and everything. So, my poor parents, I think I said, yeah, I'm now a single parent. I have 2 kids. I'm going to go to university and I'm going to be a poet. Like, wow. And they were nothing but supportive to me.
Really?
And oh yeah, I mean, I think my mom was like, "Oh, Sheree, it's going to be hard," protective.
Yeah.
And my dad was like, "You can do anything,
Uh,
and you need your education." And Fred was the one who said, "An imagination is one thing, an educated imagination is another." And you got to know the rules before you break the rules. And so that apprenticeship for me in university was reading and writing and reading and writing and reading and writing. That's what a writer needs to do: read and write and read and write, and have a sense of the tradition from which you come. I mean, I was young and blonde, David, and so when I'm doing children's books, you can imagine sometimes the attitude was like, "Pat, Pat, nice little girl. You're making our children laugh. That's nice. There's nothing." But if I opened up the other side of my mouth and became an adult and wrote about things that were darker or very, controversial, people didn't quite know what to do with that. It's
well,
like stick.
that's what I wanted to talk. I wondered how that transition. So, I mean, let's say when you were writing the Toes in My Nose, Monkeys in My Kitchen, Sleeping Dragons, you were, I don't, how old were you in those years?
I started the first poem from Toes in My Nose. I was 18. That's
Wow.
actually the truth. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And then Toes of My Nose wasn't the first one. It was Bubblegum Benny, I remember. And so Jordan, I was 17 when I got pregnant, and 18 when I had him. And by the time he was a year and a half, I was making up my own rhymes to say to him. And he'd get up from his nap and I would, play, "Oh, poor little Billy, that's a button from his belly." Think that sounds a little silly. I mean, I was a young mom and I played with my son the way my parents had played with language with me. Mom would sing "Chicory chick chala chala chickaroo me and a banana kabalaka wallaka, can't you see?" That would be my mom. My dad would be like, "Oh, wild west wind, thou breath of autumn's being." And I came from that wonderful dance of the musicality of words in my household. And so I just continued that with my children, only instead of reading it, I wanted to make it up for him, right?
Yeah.
So I was very young. Some of the original, I was way before I went to university and studied children's literature. Yeah, and then of course when Dustin came along, he was the little boy who stuck his toes in his nose. So he was a baby putting his feet in his mouth, and Jordan was going by, and he's like, "Oh, that's disgusting. And if you're not careful, you're going to stick your toes in your nose." And that was Jordan. And I went, "Oh, toes in my nose."
Wow.
So they were constant inspiration to me. I mean, and continued to be. And I mean, the inspiration's everywhere if you're willing to hear it too, right? If you're open to it. And you walk the world on sensory alert. That leaf in the last leaf in the branch of the tree is a hand waving goodbye. I remember, and kids see that, David. Kids are artists, and they are poets. They often, because I think they're still so much in touch with the sensory
Hmm.
world instead of the intellectual one. And so they're like, "Ooh, that snow looks like fudge," because it's all slushy and it looks like blonde maple fudge, and they see the crisscross of sensory perception, which I think is really important if you're going to articulate the world in a different way from reality. Just
Well,
elevate, see
it
it.
it makes you wonder if some of that sensitivity you were talking about, like we were both talking about at the very beginning, that openness is what's
Yeah.
kept you fresh as a
Well,
poet. Your
I
ability to stay in tune is because of that openness.
well, David, I don't want to make this sound like really like woo woogey and stuff, but I believe creativity is a manifestation of spirit. And, William Blake said imagination is divine. And, whatever you want to say divine is, I'm a big Blake disciple. And Al Bentley, he was my William Blake professor, and he passed away last year. And going to Al's class, and finding out about William Blake, I was like, oh, I'm not crazy after all. I kind of get this stuff.
This
I
is
get
speaking to
Frank
me.
Cronin, the first philosophy class I took from Frank Cronin, it was like, he's like, how do you know that chair is there? Maybe you only think it's there. And I'm like, I am so home. I am so somewhere where I should belong, right? And so the the manifestation of spirit, if you see your if you see writing as a spiritual practice, let's just put it that way, then you have to be open because you are a channel, is again, this sounds, but you're just being open to whatever it is, and the gift comes through you. And it doesn't always happen like that. I'm not saying that it's like you went, oh, I'm so inspired, and now no, you have to sit at that page, that empty page, and work, and you have to do sonnets, and you have to do sestinas, and you have to, before you ever do free verse, and it's a craft and a technique, and then there's the art part of it, and I think that's where the inspiration comes in, and I think that's where being open to something much bigger, the silence. I think the more I think about how I've been writing my whole life, I've been listening.
Hmm.
It's the sound of words because I've written for the ear. I've always wanted to write songs, but people have taken my poems and made them into songs, so there's something about listening to silence too, David, that as much as I talk, and I know that I talk a lot, but I mean, I can't count how many hours I've spent in silence and solitude,
Hmm.
and in order to listen deeper. And I think that's a part of your job as an artist. It's a part of the thing you're asked to do. And again, as long as you can, go to the moon and come back and go buy your groceries and try to keep your feet on the ground. I
Well,
used to, when there's a joke that Jill tells David, and I know you know this because you were there in my house and kitchen, but they took Jill aside when they knew that we were getting together and going to get married, and they said, "Oh, we want to talk to you." Now, this is what they told me, or Jill told me. They said, long after we were married, and they said, we really love our mom, and she's great, but there's something you should know about her. And he's like, "What's that?" And he said, "Well, sometimes she puts the dish soap in the refrigerator." I was like in my early 30s
yeah.
then, mid 30s then, right? And so they had me figured out a long time. When she's working, she might put the dish soap in the refrigerator. So yeah, that's
Well, it
very
it is a very challenging pursuit, and it's one that you're speaking directly to my heart right now. It's how I feel. Songwriting is very much the same. And at
I know.
first, I think when you're really young, it is very much about that blast of energy. There's a whole whack that's just in you that you're ready to just let go. But where I'm interested in is how to pursue it over the long term. What are the practices that you get into and over the long term that allow you to sustain it? And this, to me, is kind of how I keep on thinking. But the more I did it, the more I would do shows, and you have your ups and downs, and some things that are, recognized as being great works, and other things that are, you realize at the end it's actually it is like a spiritual pursuit. You're just, you are following this thing.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
comes, and your job is to follow it. You can't
that's
go
right.
chasing those reviews because they go up and
That's
down.
that's absolutely right. And at a certain point, you're not going to be everybody's cup of tea. Takes a long time. I mean, I used to carry the negative reviews around in my wallet until Jill was like, "Give that to me. I'm burning it." Like, why would you hang on to those? But you're hard on yourself too, and you want to keep exploring as an artist. Like the book "In This House Are Many Women," David. That's because in this woman are many women, many voices, many spirits. Okay, the manifestation of spirit is a, so yes, I can do happy, glad songs, but yes, I can listen and lament, or or write something from a place of anger even, and try to transform that anger into something creative and to create. So I think that's the job. You don't want to be a one tune,
But that must
singer,
have
and it
been a
goes in.
huge moment for you. I remember that book. I remember that transition. I remember all of that. And I think about it now and think about how brave it was, not
Hmm.
only to write a book like that, but to write a book having come from children's literature. That was
Yeah,
it was one of the first real, it was
it
a
was.
distinct change. And so how did people react? What was the perception? How did it feel for you? Was it liberating? Was it terrifying?
Well, again, I want to go back to Goose Lane and Fred, Suzanne Alexander saying, "We believe in your adult voice. We know that you have this other voice." So I go back to Goose Lane and Fred supporting me in that. But truthfully, David, the story about that is I was scared, and I took it to Jordan, and he was 12 at the time, I think, and maybe even older. And I said, "Now, Jordan, this is a different kind of book. I don't want you to read it, all of it yet." But I said, I read him some, and he looked at me, and he had tears in his eyes, and he's like, "Mom, you have to publish that."
Wow.
And I kind of wanted to make sure that, um, he was okay with his mother being more than just that, you know, um, happy person writing nonsense verse. And so, isn't it funny that I kind of needed that permission, but I did. And David, I mean, I brought it out, and I didn't do it anything adult for a very, very, very long time after that, because it did take a lot out of me. I didn't feel I was a literary poet, and I didn't belong in that world, and I didn't think it was really, it wasn't that. But I had so many people say, "I don't like poetry, but I like yours." And I used to think, yes, I've done my job,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't believe in that highbrow, lowbrow, middlebrow, unibrow thing. I mean, a writer named Madeline Engel, she always talked about how when there's critics and stuff, they always assess art in terms of major, minor, and mediocre.
Uh-huh.
With that British, like a minor,
Right.
and she's like, you got to forget all that. You have to write the story. You have to write the way you have to write it. Sing the songs you need to sing. That is what you keep going back to. And that's hard. It's very hard sometimes, because you think, I don't want to write that. I don't want that character in my life. Like, I wrote a book called Pluto's Ghost, and I was like, I avoided it, David, for 4 years. It was a YA novel, senior teen, a guy who was in a lot of trouble, had a lot of learning differences. And in one way, I think it was a way to channel all my worry about Dustin. But in another way, it was also, the character wouldn't leave me alone until I paid attention to it. And that sounds, I mean, that's the way when it won't go away, that's when I'm running away. So you have to look it in the eye and go, okay, it might not be anybody's cup of tea, but I obviously have to write this because it's calling me.
Right.
And yeah,
Even though
yeah.
sticking to children's poetry would have been easier in some ways for you because you
Would
had
have
it,
been
you were,
It would have been safer. I know there was a play that we did based on "In This House Are Many Women," and I had someone come up to me after the play, and an older gentleman, and said, "Just stick to writing kids'
wow.
books." Yeah, yeah, yeah. And and then somebody else said, "I just don't want to know you know that stuff," and like, and older people would say, "I don't know. I grew up with you. I don't know if I like you saying that word," you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Well,
it's
children's, I mean, it's a particular, I think it can happen in children's music as well, right? It's
I'm
hard to
sure.
move out. I mean, that's why I
Yeah.
think what's really remarkable about your career now is, especially, you can look back and go, you actually have done, you developed both very successfully, which is very
Yeah.
exciting. And that's not,
Yeah.
it's not very common.
Well, I think my adult is going to be more in my later life. I think I'm at the place where I'm not afraid like I was. I always say, so much of writing is about confidence. and nobody's ever going to believe in your book as much as you do,
Yeah.
because you've gone on the journey with it. But um, at this stage, really, David, I will always be open to doing nonsense poetry and lip slippery adventures and nonsense because I love it. I mean, I just love it's like making a joyful noise. Like, I grew up in an Anglican church that make a joyful noise unto the Lord. And so I feel like my children's work is my joyful noise, and my adult work is more like I don't know, it's more seeing it's more seeing the balance of the light and the dark
Right.
and the contradictions in life. And so it's a different place, but it's also one that I have those songs to sing too, lament, or it's a different I'm going to tell you, I knew a writer from Australia, because you go to these wonderful literary festivals and you're standing in the room and it's like, that's Roddy Doyle. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I didn't know. And I'd been talking to him for 15 minutes. And then I'm like, oh, are you one of the volunteers? Like, are you, because it was a volunteered reception on the opening night. And so he'd been asking me, oh, you do children's literature. He was asking really intelligent questions. And a lot of times people say, oh, I've always wanted to write a children's book. And so he says to me, well, I've always wanted to write a children's book. And I'm like, oh, and that's, yeah. And then I say, and are you one of the volunteers? He goes, no, I'm actually one of the authors. It's Roddy Doyle. And then I can't talk because it's Roddy Doyle. And he did write kids' books after that. So yeah, I don't know. Where was I going with that, David?
It was with someone that you had met, another person that you had met at that festival, I think. But
Yes, he wrote, and like I do, he wrote different genres and he wrote different age groups. So he did poetry and prose, he did adult and children, and he did YA, like in the middle too. And he actually told me, he said that he had three different desks in his house.
wow.
So that in order to get into this is where I write my kids' stuff, this is where I write my adult stuff, and this is where this one in the hallway, that desk in the hallways for the teenage stuff. I couldn't believe he physically had to move in order to get to that, when he knew, because you usually know, oh, this is not going to be an adult thing, and this is, you usually know. If you do really good children's books, it should be good for adults too,
Right.
right? Right.
Oh yeah, no, I mean I've been loving. That's the fun thing about me. I got kids now. We read these same books, and it's just such a joy to pass that on. But I do find it particularly interesting how you've dealt with these other emotions, as you say, the light and the dark, and particularly, obviously, with Dustin,
Hmm.
going through the experience of Dustin, and we can talk about that because I think people will.
Yeah.
We're referring to him without actually
Yes.
talking about Dustin, and Dustin was, as I said in the intro, was my best friend growing up, and then in Fredericton until grade 6 when you moved, and but Dustin had a hard life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dustin had a hard
So
life.
so Dustin was diagnosed, and then probably you didn't know this, David. I mean, because we concentrated on the shiny side, right? But in he actually failed grade one, came home, and the teacher hadn't prepared us, and so it was, yeah. He told me when he was 18 that the kids had got a hold of his report card and said, Dustin's stupid, Dustin's stupid. When he was diagnosed the next year, because we were in Wolfville, I was doing my master's degree with, at the time they said, neurodevelopmental delays, like severe ones, like that was, um, learning differences. But the woman who told me was so great. It was like she was a prophet or something. She said, I want you to sit down. I want to tell you a story before I tell you the results of his tests. And she said, I was a classroom teacher for 30 years. And she said, and there were supposed norms. And she said, not once in 30 years did I ever had a kid who fit that mold, not once. So when I retired, and she was like in her late 60s when I met her, she said, I went back to university and I took educational psychology because I know there's so many children that need this help, that need this. And so I'm listening to her. She said, so no matter what, she said, I'm going to say three things to you. She said, I call them learning differences, not learning disabilities. Number two, you will always have to be his advocate. And number three, by the time you hit high school, you're going to hit a brick wall. like and then she described what his room looked like, and like it was like from these tests she knew my child inside
Wow.
and out, upside and down. You're gonna think he's always forgetting, that he's not listening to you, but he is not going to remember. So you look at Dustin, and she said, and he is happy because you're his mom and stuff, but she said the wiring is, and she told me something that I never told anybody until after he died, really. She said most of his life it's going to be like swimming an Olympic-sized pool full of Vaseline. And that's how he sees the world, kind of that cloudy, and and so that is for me. I kind of should have. We know so much more now, David, than we did 38, 9, 40 years ago. I mean, Dustin was probably somewhere on the spectrum, but we didn't know. There wasn't anything called sensory processing disorder then. I'm pretty sure that was partly what he had. Now I know. But I did get very interested in, brains and intelligences and how we would work with that the best. But as it turned out, depression is very real. He got started to be depressed very young, and before he got into, smoking pot and all the rest of it, and self-medicating, and I remember going to the first doctor I went to. He's like, well, no, it's puberty. It's, that's typical teenager. And I was like, no, it's not. He comes home from school with circles under his eyes, and he's tired, and that's not okay. And he's a good athlete, and this is not working. So yeah, I like to think, I had a friend who said, Sheree, you worked the very best you could with the brain that he was given. And I know that I did. I know what a good mom I was for him. But I also know that the dark, dark road, David, when you have somebody you love so much and you can't fix them,
Hmm.
and you can't take the pain away, it's the most powerless feeling in the world. And you would not be able to live with that powerlessness unless you develop something much stronger, and like I said, go deeper into what strength do I have in order to not go crazy when he goes out this, as he got older. So living with someone with a mental illness, addiction is a living hell. And at the same time, Dustin was shiny. When he was good, he was good. When he's in active recovery, he was incredible. He was that little boy that you played with and had fun with. So
Well, I remember
he,
seeing him at the Christmas show when you all came,
yeah, oh, he was in such good shape,
and
and
he was in great shape.
he had a really good, I mean, he died of pneumonia. We should tell our audience that, but it was after a long struggle of mental illness and addictions, and when he died, he was in active recovery. He had been for, so we had really good recent memories. Like that was one of them, when he said, like, let's go see David. He felt like he wanted to see you again because he was coming out of the dark, right? But it's a yeah, he remained my teacher. He remains my teacher. He's never very far away from me, and that's a okay thing to say. Jill built a labyrinth for him, and I walk there every day, and not twice a day like I did at first. So I think, that's a natural rhythm that comes. It's 2.5 years, and that's still kind of early days. I still have bad days, David.
Hmm.
But my mom was my hero in this too. I couldn't have made it through without my mom because, of course, I lost my brother. She lost a son. And so when mom said to me, you won't always be this sad, I thought, she knows exactly of what she speaks. She's not saying you won't be sad, like you'll always be sad, but it will be a different kind of sad. The texture will change, it will get softer. And so the name of that book, You Won't Always Be That This Sad, David, are really my mother's words going out into the world. And so again, the kindness of friends who Deanne Fitzpatrick came and put a pen in my hand. I said, I'm never going to write ever, 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 ever again. And why would I? And you think you can't, and then I realized if I didn't face the pain, I'd spend the rest of my life running away from it. And I don't have, I'm 64. I don't want to do that. I want to
Hmm.
face reality. I want to keep creating. I want to keep sharing. So That was the toughest book I ever wrote, and I'm glad it's out in the world because there's not a week, David, that goes by. Unfortunately, there's a lot of sad people, and in the world, a lot of us, we don't come through unscathed, any of us. And so that book, it's not a book about sorrow. It's actually a book that's providing comfort, and that is such a comfort to me. So again, Dustin, he's the little boy that stuck his toes in his nose, and he's the boy who was afraid of the sleeping dragons, and now he has been a muse again to allow me to speak of what you think you can't speak of, which is sorrow, which Serena Lewis, who's a grief counselor and my friend, and she said, grief is a love story, and I say sorrow is a love song. And
Mm-hmm.
so at the end of the day, you're grateful for having loved that much. And when you get to that point, it's real. Like like I do sometimes think, well, what am I afraid of? Because the worst thing has happened to me. So why be afraid? Why be afraid of anything really? So that doesn't mean that I'm like I was on my own and I heard a really weird sound in the dark. I was a little afraid.
Mm-hmm.
But I can turn that into a poem. Like what, remember that what's knocking at my wee small door?
Yeah. It's just, I mean, I think that's it's what I've always found so amazing about you is this ability to share these feelings, especially with Dustin,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's the hardest, as you said,
Yeah.
it's the
Yeah.
most unimaginable, and it was an
Yeah.
extended
Yeah.
period that
Yeah.
was very difficult.
Yeah. It
And
was.
you
And
never and you were always there, and you felt it all. You felt
yeah.
just like I said, like when we were kids, you felt our pain. You continually felt that pain, and
Yeah.
everybody knew how hard it was.
Yes.
Everybody knew how hard, and particularly for you. And so I think that the I think it's just amazing that you were able to do this because, as you said, there's so many people in this situation. So many people have gone through this
Yes,
and
they
they
have.
feel so alone. Part of
And
all of these conversations are about feeling less alone
that's right,
because you
David.
share these emotions and you realize, oh my gosh, I thought I was the only one who felt this.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
felt this really weird way about this thing. And then you go, I don't need to. I'm not, you know,
And 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 part of that is a cultural thing where I mean there is a thing about oversharing. I don't want to know about your breakfast on Facebook. I get that. But to share what it means to be human, to share what it means to be vulnerable, instead of like, we must all be stoic and, like, I mean, I'm not saying there isn't time. Like, I did have to go out into the world and there were monkeys in my kitchen. So you do have to put on, um, put a lid on how you're feeling on a particular day. But I can only think that being real with each other, and that word is overused, that comes from a place of compassion
mm-hmm,
and loving kindness. Like, I feel pain, you feel pain. What is there? Why would we ever judge another human being if we just get down to that level? You know, that we are human. There's one thing we know is that we'll all suffer,
yeah,
we'll all die. And
yeah,
so at that level, I remember going on planes, David, and in the early days going off on a trip and being excited to go to talk to a school full of kids and the teachers who I adore. And I remember one time looking at the back of everybody's head on the plane. I was at the back of the plane. I never you don't go first class when you're a children's writer or a musician, I'm probably sure. So I'm at the back of the plane and there's all these people ahead of me and I'm sitting there and I'm looking and I'm looking, what am I looking at? I'm looking at the back of all these people's heads. And we're, thousands of miles in the air. And I'm going, aren't we human beings actually the most incredible? Look how vulnerable we are. I could come up and slap you upside the head,
mm-hmm.
any one of you at any time. And this plane could go down at any time. And here we are, acting as if we're not, this is just a business day and we're doing this, but we are also incredibly vulnerable. And when you had that was a real aha moment for me. I'm like, we're just all here on this planet winging it, we're bozos on the bus.
But it is amazing because when you throw, I say, I said weird feeling. It's not that people, it's just sometimes you can feel shame when you haven't, for feeling
Yeah,
sad, for
yeah,
feeling
Yeah.
guilt
Yeah.
for feeling
Yeah.
whatever. And the more you share those feelings with other people, you realize that that's
Yeah.
really, I think when we talk about accepting vulnerability, it's also getting rid of the shame element, right? Like
And
it's a big,
shame, and that's a societal thing too. It's like if you know that people are gossiping about you, if you know, like, I want to, one of the reasons why I think I was able to survive Dustin going through all that was Jill. It was my incredible Jill. I didn't go through it alone, David. So Jill was my anchor, and he is my rock, and so I remember one night being really upset. I think Dustin might have been missing at that time. And we kind of dealt with it very, nobody else could do anything for us. So I remember, crying and saying, Jill, I am so sorry. This is never what I wanted to give you. I never knew this is what we would be facing. And he just looked at me. I said, I just don't know how you do it. I don't know how you can put up with this. This is not, not even, you're the stepfather. And oh, he was like a father. Really, Dustin loved him like a father. And Jill just looked at me and he said, Sheree, you said love me, love my kids. That was clear. He said, you didn't say love me, love my perfect kids.
right.
He said, I knew what I was getting into. So I have to say, David, for it's the guy, that's downstairs watching us right now. He's the guy, he's my anchor, and he's what really. And another thing, and I want to say this because I want everybody who might know somebody in the world who might need this. I came across a woman by the name of Libby Cataldi. Cataldi, Libby Cataldi. And she wrote a book called Stay Close. And the first page of it opens with her son. She's a principal of a school in the States. She's, very accomplished educator. And it opens up with a page of her son, who's a heroin addict. And I was like, I'm not there. Like, I can't, Dustin's not doing it. Like, but her mantra was stay close, stay out of the chaos, which of course is almost impossible when you're
Hmm.
dealing with mental illness and addiction. You're going to be sucked down into that chaos. But that woman's book saved my life in the same way that meditation did and centering prayer did, because she shared it, and I was like, I can't believe she's sharing it, because I was hiding it. I wouldn't go to parties because I was afraid somebody would say, hi, how you doing, and I would just burst into tears because I wasn't okay at all. So during those years when I was trying to tell very few friends, because even your friends after a while, they don't want to hear it. They want you to be Sherry. They don't want to say, oh, I'm really worried about, they don't. So this book, David, it was like, I can't believe she's being so brave and she's putting it out. And she did a blog, and it was called Stay Close. And every Thursday, actually today, I'm still in touch with her. And it was sharing the experience. It was like I found a way to talk about it, a way to listen to other people's stories. I suppose it would be the equivalent of Al-Anon, like, for families of that. She was absolutely, so the book is called Stay Close. Her name is Libby Cataldi, and I have told a lot of people about her work. And she was the first one who made me realize I have to be brave enough. It was hard. I didn't want to ever, you don't want to intrude on somebody's privacy, but at the same time, you're living a hell and you need to talk about it to some people.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until Dustin was okay, like doing okay, that when I wrote Everybody's Different on Everybody's Street, that's because the Mental Health Association of Nova Scotia came in and asked me to do that. It was the Nova Scotia Hospital Foundation at the time. And I said no, because I didn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. And they were like, well, we need something to kind of break the stigma. Like, we're talking back in 2001. It was a long time ago. Those were just early days with people starting to talk about mental illness and stuff. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. And Jill and I talked about it. And again, once again, it's Jill. And we were driving to New York, and he's like, Sherry, if you don't do it,
Who's
if
gonna
if
do
you're afraid of it, it is a taboo because you don't even want to do it, and we're living it. Who but you is better to do this? And I was so mad at him because he made me know that I had to do that, and
But
I
he's
knew he
just
was
so
right.
sweet. You had to listen, and he's
And then I walked down the streets of New York, and I was just like, all these people were coming towards me, and I was like, if ever you go traveling on everybody's street, you'll see everybody's different than everyone you meet. And I know that came from, you know, seeing my son as who he was,
Hmm.
as different. I wouldn't have traded him, David, for any other model, perfect or anything, because everything he gave me, that was Dustin. That. So I don't look back and go, oh, I wish he wasn't like I was like, that was who Dustin
Yeah.
was. And I couldn't have loved him more. So that's the other thing is I met a man once who'd been in Narcanon, and he's like, I said, well, I'm the mother. What have you got to say to the mother? And he's like, I can't say it because people don't like me to say that bad word. So I'll substitute it. He just said, just keep loving him and all his mess upness.
Right.
But the word wasn't mess. Get it?
Yeah, of
But
course.
meet
Right.
the person where they are,
Yeah.
because they're in the struggle of their lifetime. They're the
Hmm.
one, is as hard as it is for you, keep loving. And that's what Libby said too. So love is, the reason things like that are cliche, keep loving, keep an open heart, is because they're so damn true. And Dustin, I have letters from Dustin saying you and Jill never gave up. You never gave up. Jordan, and again, Jordan, Jordan as Dustin's older brother, he had to watch all that. That
Yeah.
was hell for him. And so, we all suffered because of, the way Dustin was wired,
Yeah.
really. And we all loved him too, and we all miss him. So, yeah.
And you experience it together, and but I mean, you sharing that. What's interesting is that that book was so important for you, and now your books are so important for other people. You now have a different perspective on grief.
Yeah. And Dustin approved that book before he died. It was Nimbus decided to do it as a like it first it was a fundraiser, and then many like 20 years later decided to bring it out as a book, as a trade book. And he was here. He'd been living here for about 6 months, and trying to get well. And I so the proofs came in, and I'm like, I'm going to read you the foreword. If there's anything in the foreword that you don't like or you feel intruded on, like I didn't say my son, I said many of us have members in our family. I was, again, it wasn't until after he died I was able to feel. And even now, I don't talk about the details. I don't. I just, it was a reality in our lives. And so, yeah, yeah,
Well, I mean, I think it's interesting because it seems like because of this deep experience, because of your openness to it, because of you going into it, never leaving it. Not choosing the route of running away
yeah.
when he was here, and now that he's not, you still face it, you still sit with it. It's
Mm.
given you this kind of superpower in a little bit because it allows you to express. You sense other people's. It makes you even more
Yeah.
compassionate. I mean, it hurts more, I
Yeah.
suspect, but it makes me think of the poem, because we love we cry, which is so.
Mm.
It was something you wrote. Did you write it right after the shootings in Porta Peak?
So how it happened, David, is yeah, that Sunday. I mean, I know a lot of people over there, for first of all. So
Right.
when the stuff started happening, like mom actually had called from Fredericton and said, "Where's Sheree? Because something's happening." Like I was out in the pasture. I think I was in the labyrinth actually walking around. And so then when I came back in, Jill said, "Your mom called. There's something going." We turned on the radio, and then when they said Porta Pic, I was like, "Oh!" And then, of course, as the day rolled on, we were trying to get a hold of people, whatever, whatever. Went to bed that night thinking, "Oh my God, tomorrow is going to be so awful. We're gonna find out names.
Hmm.
People are going to find out who." Like I was just beside myself, and I woke up that morning crying, which I hadn't done for a long time. That's what you do for a year at least when someone's gone. You think you're never going to stop waking up crying, but you do one day. And anyway, the radio was on. And the first thing I heard was Lisa McCulley, grade 2 teacher, a mother of two. And I was already crying, and I just rolled over, and I grabbed my pen, and I just started writing. Sometimes there is no sense to things, my child. Sometimes it poured out of me, and that was it. And I have changed one line in it. Nimbus is bringing it out, and it's a nice little, almost gift, small, hold in your palm book, to get it. because it spoke to the pandemic too. And they made that decision. And I thought, yeah, and I hope some of the proceeds will go to the families. But to answer your question, that poured out of me because teachers are my heroes, David, and in a very big way. And I'll tell you why. When you are a children's writer, you know it's a whole bunch of people who love children enough to put good books in their hand. It's really not dependent on you. It's not like I've done this book and adults will go buy. It's like people who love kids and are teaching them, librarians who love them and are teaching them, grandparents, parents. So very, like I said, very early on, it's not about you. You have this web of people you're dependent upon. And so I knew that I probably knew her. I was pretty sure that and if I didn't know her personally, I knew her
Mm-hmm.
because she was a grade 2 teacher. My favorite teacher was my grade 2 teacher. And that poured out of me. And I put it on Facebook that day, and it spoke to something. But I think, David, it also came from, this is going to be hard for me to say, it came from 2 years of going to sleep every night praying for my grandchildren who no longer had a father.
Mm-hmm.
So it was also my grandmother's, wanting to say to Jackson, sometimes there is no sense to things, my grandson, so so I think that had been in me about, and God love, Emma was 3 when Dustin died. And that was so painful when she would come because she expected him to be here. So many memories here. I think that killed me, David, more than my own pain is when you have this child going,
Mm-hmm.
"Where's Daddy? Where's Daddy?" And like and what do you say? And then one day she go, "Daddy in my heart, Daddy in my heart." I'm like, "Yeah, Daddy's in your heart." I mean, all of us tried the best way we knew to articulate death to a child. So I'd been holding that, David, I think too. And so, because my first thought was, oh God, what are they going to tell the kids and the children? And I meant her students, and I meant her own children, and I meant all of these children. And then, of course, it's like, what do we tell ourselves? That's not just a poem it was like, we are the children too.
Mm-hmm.
We are children at another level. And so, yeah, it who knows? But I mean, a couple of times in my life, things have poured out like that, but not that many. Usually, it comes and it goes, and it comes and it goes, and then you change a lot and you rewrite. But
It's
um,
extraordinarily powerful. It was
it
extraordinarily powerful to read for people and for everyone because it it you could never make sense of the pain that is caused by an event like that,
you know,
but to frame it even in the simplest terms of it
it's a
is
very
because we love
we
that it
cry,
hurts so bad, and just that helps people.
and I know that there were times that when Emma would come here, I I didn't want to upset her, so I didn't want her to see me crying, but of course she would. And and I think that was like, uh, it's okay that I'm crying because I loved your dad, I'm crying, but I never said
Hmm.
that to her. But one time we were walked up the dirt road. This is very wonderful, actually. I love this so much. So Dustin was pretty basic. He was a landscaper, like, and he always said, "Mom, I mow, okay? I'm not," but he did. He became a very good landscaper. He shoveled in the winter. And so it was about 3 weeks after he died, and she came, and we had her for the weekend, and we went for a walk up the dirt road where he used to take her up this road all the time for a walk. She goes, "Let's go for a walk, where Daddy took me." And I said, "Okay, sure, we'll go." Of course. Anyway, we were coming back, and she, like I said, she's straight, and she goes, "Oma, mud makes me happy." And as I said, "Oh, oh, Emma, mud makes me happy too. Why does mud make you happy?" And she goes, "Daddy work in the mud.
Yeah.
Daddy work in the garden."
Hmm.
And I thought that she connects the earth with him. And now she comes, she goes, "Let's go see Dad, and we'll go to the labyrinth and we'll walk it together." She's been walking that labyrinth since she was, yeah, 4. And she knows what it's very powerful for her. I mean, it might not be everybody's thing, but it's about calming, slowing. In the labyrinth, you walking in, you release. In the center, you receive, you pause and receive. And then walking out, you return, as in returning to. So that ritual to me, David, became really important because that was my experience of grief. You'd release, you'd get some relief, and then you'd have to return to the real world where you buy groceries if you have enough nerve to go out
Yeah.
and meet the world again, right? So um, I, 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 I said to my mom, I said, I get it now. I get it now. I think, that song, Mom, at Christmas, oh, tidings of comfort and joy, comfort and joy. I said, that's my gig, comfort and joy.
Yeah,
That's what
that's
I
right.
do. That's what I do. That's all I do. I just, maybe that's all we all do for each other. Rejoice in the good times, cry with
Hmm.
each other, and hold each other in the hard times. David, I wouldn't have got through the COVID part, and especially after Portapic happened, if I have two wonderful women friends here, you know, Elaine and Val, and they were like, we're going for a walk, and we walked every day from the end of March till like we didn't miss a day because we could spatially distance and we were on a country road and we just and we laughed so hard. And I know we have the luxury that people didn't all have the luxury of that. And those are the people I think of when I go to sleep at night and pray. But I had these two incredible women friends who made me laugh during it. And we walked and we walked
Hmm.
and we walked. And just that act of walking is, it's you're walking, you're in movement, you're not staying stuck in one place,
Yeah.
right?
And you're sharing.
So
And you're
yeah, and so
sharing.
many people,
Yeah.
don't, felt that cooped up feeling, right?
No,
And
for sure.
yeah.
Well, we're blessed to have you, Sheree. Thank
Well,
you.
David,
You're so
I don't know.
special.
I have something to show you. This is a pic. Now, can you see this? Everybody,
Oh yeah, go a little bit to yeah. There you go. Over a little bit
I
further. Oh
was
my
going to
goodness.
embarrass David Myles, but this is in my bathroom downstairs. So if you ever come and you go to my bathroom downstairs,
Oh my
it's
gosh.
David Myles, and now they
Go over that
have
way
bathing
again,
suits
towards your face.
for
There
towards
you
my face.
go. Oh my
So
gosh.
David Myles and Dustin, they had bathing suits on, just so you know, so they did. And there we are in Quebec with Jordan.
Oh, I remember that trip.
Yeah, that was a good trip, David. Oh my God.
Oh, meeting all of Jill's family.
Yeah. Oh, oui, Gilles. It was so much fun. But this was in my mom's tub. Remember, she had a big tub, and so you
That's
guys, it was like a big, oh, I don't know, it's just a big swimming pool for you guys. Oh, you made the biggest mess in there, and Mom and I laughed our heads off. Look at you. Can you see
oh
the
my
monkey that
gosh.
you
I'll
were?
show you. I'm gonna show them a picture. You're not gonna see it, Sheree, because I'll show everybody else. But
Oh,
here's this. This is the photo I sent you just recently because I found this
oh,
when I was looking through
yeah,
my basketball cards.
love it.
Here's Dustin and I. I think we were probably 8, maybe 9. Fredericton South, Neil's Sporting Goods jerseys on, playing baseball. My mom broke it to me recently that I was actually a terrible baseball player,
Want me to
which
the
hurt.
bathroom?
But you know, it's funny, and I mean, I spoke at Dustin's funeral too to say that one thing about being Dustin's friend as a kid is that he was amazing at sports. He
Oh,
was
he was
everything. He
so
was the
good.
most gifted athlete I've ever watched. It was amazing. I was telling my kids about track and field and how I just dreaded it. I was never good at anything, and Dustin won it all. So,
He was, and that was so great for him, right? Because he had a strength, and you worked to those strengths. And Jordan spent hours with him at that basketball hoop, and
oh, amazing.
so and that was, when school got so hard for him, and they had that rule like unless you keep your average up, you can't play basketball. That killed him. I
Yeah.
was like, can't you make an exception? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he needs this, and this will help him with school. And oh, we've got our rules. And I'm
Yeah.
like, the advocacy was not an easy thing, and by the time you're so worried about something, you look like a crazy person, right? You're like, blah, 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 and they're like, oh, calm down. I'm like, this is my kid.
Of
And
course.
so every parent out there, somebody sent this morning, David, thing about having to advocate for each other in this time, especially with hospitals. Like we have to be each other's advocate. And I'm thinking, to every parent, and I remember friends of mine saying, Sheree, it doesn't matter if you're, fighting that he can't understand cursive writing. You go in there and you tell the guidance counselor, and and so there still has to be that advocacy for each other in our strengths and
Yeah.
our weaknesses. Like, yay, celebrate, and also let's support each other. And I think everybody's getting that these days,
Yep.
David. Well, I shouldn't say
Hopefully.
everybody.
No, but that's what
Yeah,
that's what we're moving. That's what we're trying. That should be the goal.
yeah,
That
yeah.
should be
It
where
is.
we're headed. It's a good way to put it. Comfort and
Yeah,
joy.
yeah. Comfort and joy.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much. There's been so many people have written all these great notes about you.
Oh,
I get these
are you live?
comments.
Because you're live,
We're
right?
live.
Oh,
I
right.
know. The nice thing about this
You
is
didn't ask me to do a
I
poem,
forget about
right?
it. We just start talking and then I just forget. But there's people who've
But you didn't
been.
ask. You didn't ask me to do a poem. I want to give you a poem. I want to do a poem for you, and then I'll say goodbye.
Oh, okay, I'd love. You know what? I just can I read? Someone just wrote and said my memory of Dustin will be him about 8 launching threes during half times at Jordan's games. He was incredible.
That one, I remember that too. Him going out at halftime. I forgot about that. See, it's so great when people give you great memories. That's such a gift. So I'm gonna. Um, this poem comes from a book called "If I Had a Million Onions," and I like this poem because, it goes back to like we all just have to keep trying to do the best we can do, and it goes back to Jill who says it's not about perfection. So it's called "Do Your Best." Under the circumstances, okay?
Great.
There is no land of perfect child. There is no sea of ease. There is no candy apple trail. There's broccoli and peas. There is no suit of armor, child. There's arrows and there's pain. And when your heart is broken, child, stay strong and love again. There is no perfect person, child, not presidents or queens. I wrote that a long time ago. There's only all us trying, child, to be human beings.
I love you, Sheree. Thank you so
I love
much.
you, and you turned into a wonderful human being.
I
Love
can't
to the kids.
for sure. I can't wait to see you.
Bye, Mom. Bye, Leanne. Mwah.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Thank you.
Love you.
Oh, thanks everybody for watching and for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll do it again next month. I'm going to try to do this about once every month. It's really special. This was a special one for me. And I'll pass on all your notes to Sheree. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, drop me a line if you have any thoughts on the show. I'll pass it on to Sheree for sure. So thank you very much. We'll see you again. Take care of yourselves. Bye.